Call to order the regular meeting of the Rio Dell City Council. Roll call, please.
Mayor Dorns?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Whittle?
Here.
Councilmember Johnson?
Here.
Councilmember Strand?
Absent.
And Councilmember Wilson?
Here.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public presentations. This is the time for persons who wish to address the council on any matter not on this agenda and over which the council has jurisdiction. As such, a dialogue with the council or staff is not intended. Items requiring council action not listed on this agenda may be placed on the next regular agenda for consideration if the council directs, unless a finding is made by at least 2/3 of the council that the item came up after the agenda was posted and is of an urgency nature requiring immediate action. Please limit comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. And don't knock us down. Hello. And Happy New Year, everyone. Yay.
Do you have to do anything to make this work? No?
Is it work? I'm assuming it's
on.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Michelle Bushnell, and as you may have heard, I am running for the 2nd District Supervisor. I am here this evening to introduce myself. I am a 4th-generation Southern Humboldt resident who was raised on a cattle ranch by my grandparents. Together, my husband and I have raised our 6 children here and intend to spend our remaining years here. I have always deeply cared about my community and have been proactive in helping wherever I see the need. I believe that if elected, I will be a diligent and transparent supervisor for the 2nd District. I have a variety of life and employment experiences which have led me to where I am today. From the years when I drove children safely to school on the bus to now owning and operating a retail store in Garberville. I really hate this stuff, by the way. My husband and I own also a cattle ranch and a timber management program. And I also assist my husband with his land surveying business. I will bring this range of knowledge and experience to the office of supervisor. I have also been a member of several community boards in the past. South Fork Booster Club president for 5 years, Garberville Rodeo Board 3 years. Presently, I am the Southern Humboldt School Board clerk for 2 years, and I'm a Southern Humboldt Chamber president for 2.5 years. I understand the importance of having an effective working relationship with fellow board members. Working together is the best way to make change for the greater good. Living rurally, it has been my experience, and I have learned over the last several years that it is much the same in incorporated areas that the volunteer and nonprofit organizations, such as volunteer fire departments, hospice, senior centers, and VFWs, etc., are the backbone of communities and lead by example the ways in which communities can stay connected and supportive of each other. These organizations unify rural and incorporated areas like we have in the 2nd District. With my leadership qualities and your input, I feel I can facilitate positive changes that are needed. I have always worked hard no matter what the task has been or the outcome desired. Amongst the many concerns affecting the 2nd District, the following are some which seem to plague the majority, which I would like the opportunity to work on if I am elected. Promote economic stability throughout the 2nd District, create solutions for supporting our elderly, the mentally ill, and homeless populations, improving rural infrastructure, streamlining operations of County Planning Department for business and development. More prominent presence of law enforcement and decreased response times in the unincorporated areas. In closing, the situation in the 2nd District has changed drastically over the last decade. For our children and for our futures, I want to affect positive changes. Thank you for your time. I look forward to interacting with you all and have added my contact information in the candidate statement I gave you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Your Honor. Rick Pelrin.
I learned to say Your Honor when I lived in the South. And there in the South, if you were a mayor, you were called Your Honor. So, Your Honor and the board, I wish you a Happy New Year. Thank you. Very proud of our Rio Dell Senior Exercise Group, who were heavily involved with our fight against the windmill project. A good number of our group were actively participated, including a time when we were canvassing the neighborhood. And I was busy myself, a few of the other members were busy, when an 81-year-old lady from our group stepped forward and did the canvassing with a bad foot and all, and dedicated herself to canvassing. And of the 621 signatures, she personally had collected 196 of them. Yeah, so we're real proud of our group. We're proud of our community, and proud of our Rio Dell City Council for fighting the way you did. Yeah, and
What's the 81-year-old's name?
Ruth. Ruth is her name, and you may know her.
Yeah, she comes in.
Yeah.
I just didn't know.
Yeah. Anyway, so the dialogue, even though the project is gone, the good things remain, and that is the dialogue among people about our future. And today I even brought my own coffee cup because I thought, why should I take that paper cup and throw it in the trash and then have someone else have to deal with it? And so it has made the change with me, and if it could make a change with me, then it could make a change with anybody in an entire community. And I know that the City Council is endeavoring to make a change in that direction, since I believe that we've all committed ourselves as a community to that. And again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks for everything you did, and thanks to your group. It was really awesome and impressive.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, Mayor Garnes and council members and Kyle. I came tonight because I just wanted to say thank you and let you know that you truly did make a difference in our making a corporate beast go away. And you're to be applauded for that, so thank you.
Thank you.
And as you move forward in your energy efficiencies, if you need any volunteers, give me a call. I'll be happy to step forward and assist you in any way I can. But thank you. You did make a true difference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So seeing no one else, we'll close public comment and move on to the consent calendar. Is there any item from the consent calendar that a council member would like to remove?
Number 2.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, removing items 2. Is there a motion for items 1 and 3?
Community comment.
I'm sorry? Oh, would anyone in the community like to comment? Thank you. So, or actually remove an item? No? Okay. Hearing none, I will bring it back to the council.
In regards, I would move that we accept items 1 and 3 from the consent calendar.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second.
Did I pull the right item?
You put
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Motion passes 4-0. Councilmember Wilson.
I had a couple questions on this. I believe it starts
Page 9.
page 9. And it's actually on page 10. And I understand that this is something that we passed with the 2020 or 1920 budget, and I see that staff has done a good job and got it done for less than what we budgeted for. So for the $24,000, roughly $25,000 versus $35,000, and not to exceed 30. But on page 10, it talks on the term. It says this agreement shall become effective on January 20th of 2020, and run until December of 2020 unless sooner termination in accordance with Section 12. After the initial term, the agreement shall automatically renew for an additional 2 years unless each party provides a 60-day written notice thereof, and they make a comment, it's time specific. So if we don't cancel it before that, then we have an additional 2 years at 25,000 or 30,000. And so it's really not 30, it's not really 25,000 a year, it's or 25,000 total, it turns into 75,000. And the other reason why I'm not saying it's not a bad idea to update each year as the thing progresses, but it looked like on page where the appendix is, on page 22, the attachment B has the list of the compensation of what they're going to do. And there's a line at the top of that concerned me where it said, you're going to do the 165 hours and without the express written authorization of the city manager. That seems okay for the first year because that's what we're looking to do. But in the second and third years, to understand all of the different classifications and how those break down, the major part of that work I see being done in the first year. And if it would be possible to negotiate a lower number, B, C, and D seem to be those. It's about 80 some hours. It's about half of the money. And that's my question, I guess, to the city manager is it necessary to spend 25,000 3 years in a row, or just update the 25,000, the partial part of whatever new numbers change as inflation occurs or things change, that we do it for less is all. That's my question.
I called and asked the same question, so.
Thank you, Mayor Garnes, members of the council. So the first few pages of the contract are standard boilerplate language that we typically have in a contract. In this case, I anticipate the work to be completed entirely by the end of April. The only reason why there would be an additional 2 years there in the potential in the contract would be if in subsequent years there's an unforeseen event that we need to update a classification or update a study for the billable rate. You'll see that this contract, this agreement establishes a billable rate that at this point, what the estimate is a maximum of $24,750 unless prior authorized. So if everything goes to plan and there are no surprises, the end bill would be $24,750. We would never get anywhere close to $75,000. And in subsequent years, the council would have to budget it if you would want to do another compensation study, for example, in the next fiscal year, but there's no real reason to do that. So what this contract does is basically establishes the billable rate. They believe that they can accomplish the work described in 165 hours, or close to $25,000. And we don't anticipate at this time even going to the immediate through December of 2020, but having the work completed by the end of April.
And I understand that. So then it wouldn't cost $75,000 this year, but it would if we had to go 3 years. But if in the budget process time, if they pretty well got this done or have it done, then as we set our budget, because we're still 60 days before 2020 or December, then at that time we could, as a council, could authorize and say, we want you to send a letter that we don't want to extend this for an additional 2 years.
Yeah, if the council would gave that direction, we could always terminate the contract at any time,
or the end of the year
down the road. But right now, there's really no intention to to utilize these services beyond the 24/750. It's for unforeseen events or other council direction that you give us.
So if nothing changes, let's say, in 2021, 22, nothing changes, then there's no output. I mean, just because it says they can go an additional 2 years doesn't mean that. Even if we did not end the contract, is that?
Right.
So nothing would.
So there's no extension beyond the 24/750 unless it's authorized. So there would be, a billable rate, but you'd have to have that money in the budget in order to utilize their services. They perform pretty specific work, a compensation study. It's really only going to be relevant towards the study that they perform. So for example, the council has talked about potentially budgeting and hiring a code enforcement officer position. I'll just give that as an example. That's one of the things bandied about. The council can give that direction, and we already have a contract with an expert to help us develop a job description and to help us develop the appropriate compensation for that position. Another thing that may occur is for example, with the wastewater treatment facility, since the last compensation study report, the state requirements for that job have gone up tremendously. The requirements under the old facility were significantly lower. We now have to hire much more technically experienced, knowledgeable, smart people, and they cost more money. And so we need to adjust the compensation accordingly. So that could happen again, maybe in another job classification or job description. This gives us an opportunity to, fix that. And obviously it would come with the council's full awareness and
So it basically locks in something that if we don't use, we don't use?
correct.
But,
Well,
and I get all that, and I don't disagree with any of what you said, except that the way this appears to be worded, it says after the initial term, the agreement shall automatically renew for an additional 2 years, unless either party provides the other 60 days written notice. And it looks to me like it automatically triggers, and it's renewed unless we tell them no 60 days prior to December of 2020. The need to have them come back at that established rating to do everything you said is fine, and I think that's great. But I just don't want us to get stuck, that we're stuck for an additional 2 years.
so they would have to be authorized to work on behalf of the city, to perform billable work that they would then bill the city. They don't just automatically, even under this agreement, they don't automatically get $25,000. And in fact, there are ways that we can actually trim some of the hours off of this to come in well under $25,000.
Well, that's where I'm headed.
So, for example, presentation to the council, you have to bring somebody up here to give the presentation. That's something that could be cut and funding wouldn't be provided. But unless there was billable work that they performed in a subsequent fiscal year, there would be no bill.
Kyle, the last one of these was done about 10 years ago, wasn't it?
10 years
And
ago.
it was roughly in the same amount.
It was in the city spent $23,080 on that particular study. So it's basically the same amount,
10 years.
slightly higher
Yeah,
after 10
but after
years.
10 years, that's pretty.
So, does that satisfy? Are you good with it?
If what he's telling me that they're not gonna do it, yeah. If we have the ability to say don't do stuff, then it's,
But we don't even have to say don't do stuff.
So-
Just to be absolutely clear, all we have to do, even if it automatically renews, it's really just sitting there on a shelf unless we need to.
What it means is they're automatically renewed, and so if the city manager, on behalf of the city, needs them to perform work, as I gave 2 examples before, they're already under contract. They can perform the work. There's no need to go out to bid to perform the work. They work for us.
Is there a motion to approve or not approve?
I make a motion to approve item number 2.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Motion carries 4-0. Now we'll move on to the city manager staff update. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor Garnes, members of the council. This item's on page 28 of your report, of your packet. We do have some good news to report that's not in the packet. Over the break between the last meeting and in this particular meeting, we received signature papers for the sanitary sewer evaluation study grant. So that's about $300,000 in state funding to do analyses and recommend a plan for the wastewater collection system. As the council may recall, the wastewater treatment plant itself was upgraded about 6 or 7 years ago to a relatively new but technology that's being adopted by other jurisdictions. We have some of the highest or most stringent standards in the North Coast region for our water quality because we discharge directly into the Eel River. Although not in the summer months, we have a disposal field. And so we operate under some of the strictest requirements in the state of California and the entire country. And so we have a new wastewater treatment plant, but our collection system is aged and has inflow and infiltration when it rains, and we occasionally do have overflow events. So this really represents a fundamental cornerstone in order to fix that problem in the long run. This is a problem that will take the next 20 or 30 years to tackle, but the SSES will help make the city eligible for grant funding. And what that means is that ratepayers then don't have to foot the bill when we have SSOs, when we have major construction projects to do to replace and upgrade the lines. So it's very good news, and I think probably makes Derek very happy. So, yeah, we did, and I apologize for the date is incorrect on the first bullet point. It's not December 2nd, it was around the 17th that the Board of Supervisors voted regarding the Terrigen Wind Farm, and the board did vote to deny that particular project. We had great representation from members of the council, in particular the mayor, representing the city at that meeting. It was a very large meeting, lots of people, lots of security, lots of emotions running high. But in that particular issue, the city's position did end up prevailing. I also we'll discuss this on the next agenda item, but I was able to meet with DANCO and DHHS representatives regarding their project rollout. And we've been working on putting together contracts with Mercer Fraser. So just today we got some signed copies of that contract back from Mercer Fraser for the ATP project. So we're closing in on getting that project lined up. Again, that was the ATP project, a $1.5 million grant that's going to reconfigure the 101 Wildwood intersection area. And we are in the process of issuing letters to those who signed the petitions thanking them on behalf of the mayor, and requesting that they also thank their supervisors. So if anybody's watching and has not done so already, to feel free to call the Board of Supervisors and thank them for their votes and for that hearing. That was a difficult hearing for everybody who attended, very long. And it never hurts to just simply do a simple courtesy, leave a message on the phone or send an email. With that, I will return it to the council to see if there's any questions for staff.
Thank you, Mayor Garnes. Kyle, regarding the $300,000 study for the sewer collection system, is this a contract that we would routinely grant to GHD, or is this one that we will go out for requests for qualifications and proposals on?
So this one would be performed by GHD.
Okay, thank you.
Questions?
Yeah. Kyle, can you just give us a little update? Because I know there were people in the community that were concerned about the mailboxes.
Yeah, yes, and I forgot about the mailbox. So Thursday evening, we did receive representatives from the Postal Service, contract employees, and then actual employees of the Postal Service did show up and began installing postal boxes on Wildwood Avenue. Staff became aware of this around midday on Friday. We investigated. It was really kind of basically news to us. We did have a postal employee come and let staff know that they were in town working on various things, but they did not really indicate that they were doing what they were doing. So I would just chalk it up to and give them the benefit of the doubt that it was a series of miscommunications really on their end. They thought they were coming in here with a lot more permissions than, and they actually had 0 permissions. So we immediately were in contact with them, and they agreed eventually to take down the brand new boxes. And then just today we were able to issue a permit for them to go ahead and replace boxes that are in existing locations. So if there's already a cement pad and you already have parcel boxes and community neighborhood mail boxes, those are going to be replaced and upgraded with ones that are slightly larger but still fit within the same footprint. So, obviously it's another story to be placing these boxes in various locations without the permission of the city or property owners. And so the representative was courteous and they did begin uninstalling the boxes today. They still have a lot more work to do. But we anticipate that they'll be done by the end of the day on Friday. And we were able to notify the other cities of these events, because it appears that Rio Dell was the first city to have these installations placed in there. So they headed off to various locations in the unincorporated county and then also the city of Fortuna. And it sounds like Eureka and Arcata were next. So all of those cities have been informed of that. And in Fortuna's case, it was also news to them. And I don't know exactly with Eureka or Arcata where they stood with that. But.
And speaking to that, I had to go to the post office today, and they really, really wanted me to stress tonight that this was not the local post office, that the local post office knows how to work with the city and has worked with the city in partnership and did not request this to happen, that they were equally surprised, and that the gentleman that is installing them is going to come tonight, because apparently they did remove some, not all of them yet, but the ones they removed, they did not pull the bolts up. So they were sticking up still. And he's supposed to be here this evening shearing those down. And they really just wanted me to stress to everyone that it's not the Rio Dell post office. This is not them doing this. It is the greater post office, apparently. So they just want us to know that they know how to work with us and they're good partners with us.
And Kyle, thank you for taking action
Yeah,
on that
definitely.
right away.
Thank you.
I sure appreciate that.
And thanks for notifying the others. Probably appreciate
And
it.
I appreciate that. Kyle and I talked, and I appreciate, I'm not sure what's going on there, but I'll be less diplomatic than you, but it doesn't sound like it was the right thing to do to the city. And so I appreciate your proactive action.
Does anyone from the community wish to say anything to this, to the staff report, a question, anything?
I have a question directed for Kyle. I don't wish to waste the council's time. I was curious, going back to the sewage treatment facility. Evidently, from what you're saying, there's a problem when heavy rainfall that then the system becomes overloaded. And I was under the impression that the fresh water was separated from the sewage, from the waste. And to what extent is that? And I'm wondering if the runoff, if it's just runoff, I don't understand the mechanics nor the layout or the configuration of it. But I am understanding you're saying that a heavy rainfall, you have a runoff situation. Could you describe that?
We'd be happy to do that after the meeting with you, but it's a pretty common problem.
It is.
A lot of other jurisdictions have it as well.
I'm aware that it is. It has been a problem in other jurisdictions. I was just curious about that. I'll just talk to you about that another time.
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Rick. No other questions? I'll bring it back to the council, and we will move on to special call items. Authorize mayor to execute a letter to the Cal Public Utilities Commission regarding PG&E's bankruptcy. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor Garnes, members of the council. The item's on page 33. And so it was Councilmember Wilson who requested that this be agendized, and the council concurred. So just quickly, I will state that there has been a letter issued by a group of elected officials representing various cities and counties throughout the state of California to the CPUC, asking that the CPUC consider changing PG&E from an investor-owned utility to a customer-owned utility. So this letter's already been issued, but now there's the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors and also the Railroad Coast Energy Authority that have also considered sending their own letters and have approved sending their own letters. Attached, you'll see a draft letter that we went ahead and typed up that is basically a copy of the letter from the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors. And the letter is not specific to converting PG&E into an investor-owned utility, but is open to all different options being explored, which I would assume could mean breaking up the utility, could mean making it public, or could mean leaving it as it is, or any combination therein. So with that, that's the attached letter on page 34. You'll see in your packet on page 35 is the original letter from the various agencies from Southern California to Northern California. And then also on page 39 is the press release that resulted from that letter. And so with that, Mayor Garnes, we might see if Councilmember Wilson has anything to add.
Just looking at yours, I didn't see the one we had as a draft. I read the county one. I didn't read the.
Or the
Okay,
one
you're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
What I wanted to see. what the county said, the letter that's on page 35 is the one that was circulated, I believe, started out of the city of Santa Rosa. And that has gone out to quite a number of cities, and that's the one that was brought to RCEA along with, for us to look at the last meeting. In the interim between that, when it took place, when the county met and when we met, the county had written the one that's there for the county. And what they changed was they added the word down towards the last, proven options such as replacing PG&E with a customer-owned utility. And then you've done this similar thing to a PG&E to a customer-owned utility, but also indicated that other options should be considered. And the thing that the county, I believe, did was it opened it up to more than just a blanket investor-owned company. It gave it the question to do something, take a look at, investigate what to do that's better than what it is. And the gist of all the letters is saying the PG&E is operating under like bondholders or stockholders for profit. And their emphasis isn't necessarily infrastructure, where there needs to be a better way to do our infrastructure. They have not done a good job, which is not hard to see, in the last 30 years, replacing their infrastructure, particularly in Humboldt County. This is probably the worst place you want to deal with it because of our terrain and what we are, but that's the gist of the letter, and I just would like to see if we would sign on as a city and agree that we take a move towards PG&E getting this thing fixed.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. Comments, questions, council?
Just,
Thank you.
it appears that there's a typo on our suggested letter, page 34, the second paragraph, first sentence, looks like it needs a period instead of a comma.
Where are you on the second?
Second paragraph.
Third
on
sentence
November
down.
4th.
8 letters in, right after proceeding, it should be a period.
Yes, correct. I don't have a problem, any other problem with the letter as drafted.
Thank you.
So I have a question. So I don't mind the exploring, but once we explore and once they come up with different options, who gets to say so? Do we vote on it? Will it be a vote? I mean, not just us. I mean, a whole vote, or are there going to be certain people who will?
I'm not a lawyer, so I can't tell you that, but ultimately the CPUC has to say, the California Public Utilities Commission, along with probably there's a lot of different things going on in the state. Governor Newsom he wants to take it over as a state-owned entity.
Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about.
And there's this is requesting the PUC to take a look at it. It's not saying do that. It's saying, I understand it to say take a look at something alternative to what is there.
There's something, the CPUC regulates services and utilities, protects consumers, safeguards the environment, and assures California access to safe and reliable utility infrastructure and services. They've done a poor job. I mean, you put the blame on PG&E. The CPUC has done a poor job in doing their job too.
I won't disagree with you,
Right.
but I just
Yeah.
something needs to be done.
And it's hard for me because I can't wrap my mind about any of the things that might happen. I mean, if we went to an investor-owned, I was asking Kyle, does that mean we get rid of everybody from PG&E? I mean, who takes over? I just can't wrap my mind about how any of it would happen. And
It's the PUC, the PUC, I'll just call it P. That's their, actually it's mandated by, I believe, the Constitution, California Constitution, to do what you just read.
I know.
Their mandate is to protect us as citizens in however they do that.
But they haven't. I mean,
Well,
you know, you'd say that PG&E hasn't done their job. Well, the PUC, in my opinion, hasn't done their job in protecting us from.
We still have to stay after them, even if you think they haven't done their job or they haven't done their job. we still have to stay after them, because if we don't, then we're just giving up and just letting them do whatever, which isn't good, because that's
No,
kind of where they've
just-
been.
Like I said, I just can't see how it'll all play out, and that bothers
It's
me.
complicated.
I can't.
It is very
I mean,
complicated.
if I could know for sure that it was gonna come back to the people to take a vote, instead of somebody in Sacramento deciding this is how we're gonna do it,
I see what you're saying.
I would feel much better about it. But I hate to leave it up to somebody, and that's just how I feel.
I think sadly, we don't have a choice because they run the show. I mean, I think that that's the bottom line, is that they are tasked, that's what they're supposed to do. And so they have to do it, and the only way is to keep after them, to try and keep them,
But they may have to do it, but I don't have to agree.
that's a fact.
Yes.
I see it kind of like a petition saying,
Yeah. Do something.
cities are saying, do something.
Well,
To the
and
piece.
like I just said, if I could know that it would come back and we could all make a decision on it, you know, we all had some input, but I think probably after this letter, it'll be the last of the input. But that's all. That's just my opinion.
Okay. Would anyone from the public like to make a comment or ask a question regarding this issue? No? Okay, then I will bring it back to the council. Is there a motion to accept the letter?
I'll make a motion that we accept staff's proposed letter.
There's a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second? In favor, it passes 3-1 with Councilmember Woodall dissenting. Discussion on Danco project. Page 43.
Thank you, Mayor Garnes, members of the council. We did have this item agendized at the last meeting back in December. So back in December, we discussed the potential of an ad hoc committee during the rollout of the Danco project. In that particular meeting, that discussion was really continued to this meeting because Councilmember Strawn, who is the originator of the idea, was not present. I'll just provide the council with an update on the latest information that I have available. So back in early December, Danco was still holding to the December 31st completion date. Obviously, they have not met that. But they should be completed January 17th is their target date. So, and they are making quite a bit of progress. So we anticipate that will be roughly the move-in date for the project. We have been hearing that a number of Rio Dell residents are getting into the project. Okay. So. In terms of a possible tour, I have extended that question and request multiple times, and I will get back to the council as soon as I hear back from them, but that tour may need to happen on fairly short notice if it happens at all. And then I was able to meet with representatives from Danco and also the county's Department of Health and Human Services with City Clerk Karen Dunham. And we had a very good meeting with them. Kimberly Brown is going to be the project manager for the actual site. Kimberly Brown is the individual who has been running the Rio Dell apartments. So so just right next door. So, and those are very well run apartments, and so we're very pleased. I don't think that there really is a better person than Kim to operate the facility and do the day-to-day management. She'll be working with her daughter and living on site to manage the property. So that's absolutely fantastic news. In terms of I did broach the topic of having an ad hoc meeting with council members. At this point in time, though, they both did make it clear to me that they were interested in working with city staff as problems arose and dealing with those as they would arise. I got nothing but positive impressions that they would absolutely be working with the chief of police on issues that do arise. But probably the biggest takeaway for me was really their reframing of the conversation, as opposed to the impact on the neighbors, but really that the city's there in a role to help protect the residents of the facility, which I agree with 100%. That these are going to be vulnerable individuals who may be under threat of being manipulated or taken advantage of by non-residents, and so it's important that we recognize that these are at-risk individuals, and there was a lot of positive reception to the idea that maybe there could be some sort of donor-type program for supplies, and because obviously, as Councilmember Johnson stated at the last meeting, these are going to be people occupying homes that generally they're not going to have a whole lot of furniture or things like that, and so they're going to need a lot of assistance, and so they had a very positive reception to the idea of the city potentially doing some work in that regard, trying to raise funding or working with the community. So I don't have much else to update the council on, but certainly if you have any direction or any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you, Mayor Garnes. Kyle, did Danco indicate how, an individual or an organization could get supplies to the proposed tenants?
So one of the concerns that they did raise is the idea of having, people come and drop off supplies or, excess furniture or whatnot, is that it's kind of hard to manage. People, sometimes they don't always donate the most useful stuff,
Sure.
And then they're kind of stuck with that. So I think what they were hoping that we could partner on is raising funding, just straight dollars, to buy some of the initial basic needs for the residents. There's only going to be 25 units, so it's an obtainable goal. But if we try to raise $100 a unit or something like that to either buy cards at Dollar General or towels, that sort of thing, that would be tremendously helpful. So we'll be working with them, certainly with the mayor, to come up with kind of a strategy in terms of how to best execute that and be a positive force with the group there. The city went ahead and took the initiative. We did purchase some mugs for the residents, I Love Rio Dell mugs, so that we can have those on the property.
Thank you. Julie?
Do they come? They come furnished with refrigerators and stoves, all appliances.
I believe so, but they don't. They're not going to come with beds. They're not going to come with towels. They're not. I don't believe they're going to come with utensils, that sort of thing.
Right,
so,
but I mean they have like stove and a refrigerator,
Yeah.
but not all the other stuff.
Right.
Right.
Did anyone from the public have a question or comment?
Ms. Mayor, City Council, I know you're doing a lot of multitasking, and with me, it's amazing to come and watch you juggle all of these balls and on all these different areas. And kudos to you for doing that. The thing that comes to my mind is that when I went to Reading, visited my daughters and son-in-law and their family, they had one garbage bin, and it really wasn't nearly large enough. And then there were no recycle bins. And I'm wondering if this would be Danco's responsibility to provide adequate recycling, as well as, adequate size of garbage. But then when you're recycling, it takes, you don't need as large a garbage bin. And I would encourage you to cover that point with Danco to see what can be done about providing recycling bins, because I know that the tenants would all take advantage of those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Anyone else? I'll bring closed public comment, bring it back to the council. And I think this was just informational. So we will move on to item 3, discussion on article entitled Beyond Ethics, Establishing a Code of Conduct to Guide Your Council. Councilmember Johnson. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Garnes. In our last meeting, I did point out this article in Western City, which is the magazine that the California League of Cities publishes, and monthly magazine. Great article. And I think it would serve the city well, not just for our current council, but for councils going down the road 10, 20, 30 years, to have a code of conduct. There are several articles that are referenced on page 46, second paragraph from the bottom. The Institute of Local Government's website has 2 additional articles which are phenomenal reading, and I would recommend that not only council but also staff take a look at those articles, and that we take the next step, and that is bring in a facilitator, have a neutral site to have a meeting, and chart out a pathway for us to follow and for future councils to follow.
Thank you. Questions?
Well, would that mean we need to redo our current code of ethics and codes that we have in our city ordinance?
Well, our protocols take a giant step, but they're not the complete walk down the pathway. I don't think, Frank. I think we need some more guidelines in our relationships with not only one another but with our staff also, and not just that, but the public. We're being watched, we're being recorded right now, and that's going to be archived for a long time. If we can keep a council member from putting a foot in the mouth by making a commitment that they're going to follow just logical guidelines for how to treat other people, I think we'll be well served.
I think it's a good thing to have the meeting. We had one of these. It's been a few years, I think, that we actually had a thing where the League of Cities came up. We went out to the Sequoia Park Zoo
Right.
at a conference hall, and we went there and we had a meeting, and they did a workshop that had I think some of what you're talking about in the articles, how to work with your city manager, how to work with. It was a good subject. It was a good thing, and I believe that was reached out. I don't know if you helped facilitate that or who put that together, but it was was for all the cities. It came around on election time, and it was, all the cities participated, and the county participated, and it covered a lot of this stuff. It's a little different than what you're asking about redoing a code of conduct. And I'm not opposed to it. I just see that we do have a code of conduct. If we need to modify it and strengthen that, then fine. You know, to have a meeting, if we have a meeting, it has to be a public meeting, because of the Brown Act. So we have to, whatever we do, we have to set that up in that manner.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's a great idea. I'm for it.
Anyone from the public like to make a comment or ask a question? Seeing none, I will bring it back. It's a good idea. Can't hurt. It certainly can't hurt.
Can't hurt.
So, I'm not exactly sure what kind of motion I would be asking for, though. City manager, could you help me?
Well, I think the direction would be for staff to go ahead and bring back a item related to the first steps of developing a code of conduct for the council. So probably what we would try to do is identify a third-party consultant who can come in and help us with that. That might take a little bit of time, and then we can agendize and find a time where we can meet outside of normal council business.
And outside the council
Chamber?
If that's what the council would be interested in doing.
Would you want to do that in another city, or do you want to do it, do we have a place here to do that in Rio Dell?
God, last time we did one up on Monument, but that place is long gone.
That's a place they burnt down.
Yeah.
Yeah, lost that opportunity.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful to do it at a third-party location, and there's plenty
And it
of
would
them
still
right
be
immediately in
public.
the area.
Yes,
Yeah.
just wanted to.
So do I need to, is this just a consensus to tell you to move forward with that, or do we need to take a vote?
I think it's consensus works.
Okay.
Consensus works, all right, we're all consensed. Thank you. And that brings us to introduction and first reading by title only of ordinance 378-2019, establishing a water-efficient landscape ordinance, Chapter 13.40 of the Rio Dell Municipal Code.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I apologize for not getting this to your council earlier. This was originally scheduled for the first meeting in December, which I was sick, and then I was actually out of town at the Calvo Educational Week, in the second meeting. The ordinance numbers actually changed because it's now 2020, so it's ordinance number 378-2020. The purpose of this ordinance is really to create efficient water landscaping regulations, and it's state mandated. This was actually the result of the 2014 drought, when not only the city of Rio Dell, but many of the cities up and down the state faced water shortages. Probably, as you know, about half the urban water in the state is used for landscape purposes, which actually kind of surprised me. The staff report starts on page 49 of your packet, and then the ordinance itself starts roughly on page, I want to say 50 or 51. I guess it's 51. So if you want to flip to the ordinance, I'll try to highlight some of the highlights in the ordinance. Starting on page 52, it identifies the projects or the developments that the ordinance would be subject to, new public or commercial projects, and rehabilitated landscape projects with landscape areas of 2,500 square feet or more, new residential projects with landscape areas of 2,500 square feet or more, and those are typically, like the Danville project, for example, would be subject to this. And I actually spoke to their superintendent today, and I've asked them if they'd be willing to complete the documentation so that we could actually submit it to the state, and they said that they would. So that's good news. And then existing residential landscape projects, that are 5,000 square feet or more and that are served by community water. Exempt activities would include local, state, federal historical sites, someone like the Carson Mansion, ecological restoration projects, mine reclamation projects, plant collections such as botanical gardens and nature centers, and the community gardens. I was pleased to see that community gardens are exempt. And by the way, what we are adopting is the state model. We are not adding anything to this ordinance, just what's mandated by the state. Many jurisdictions, including the city of Davis, which I incorrectly referenced in the ordinance, has gone well above the state mandated requirements. Again, we are just implementing or recommending that we implement the state mandated projects. The submittal requirements are on page 57 of your packet. They include the landscape documentation package, which includes general project information, the landscape worksheet, the soils management report, the landscape and grading design plan, and then of course the irrigation design plan. And we require for design review projects many of these elements already. And then prior to the certificate of occupancy for projects, again we get a copy of the project description if it's changed. There's the certificate of installation, and then the copy of the landscape irrigation audit. They're actually certified landscape auditors. I reached out to the National Irrigation Association and the Department of Water Resources to find out who is certified here in Humboldt County. And there probably aren't a lot of them, but this may be an opportunity for folks to actually create themselves a job. The landscaping standards are identified on page 58. Basically it says that the water use cannot exceed the water allowance. And there's a mathematical equation on what that water allowance is based on your area, your plant materials, the amount of turf that you have. On page, I believe, on page 78, 77, page 77, they actually have what's called an evapotranspiration table. And in Humboldt County, they've identified 4 cities, 4 communities: Eureka, Ferndale, Garberville, and Hoopa. I reached out to DWR indicating which one of the 4 that we would use, or if they would have to basically come up with a new rate for the city of Rio Dell. And they suggested, or actually required, that we use the city of Ferndale's, and their annual evaporation rate is 27.5 inches. Garberville is 35 inches, and Humboldt's actually 35, almost 36 inches. So that actually will help us, help the proponents of these projects. 25% of the landscaped area has to be native plants. Plants having similar water needs have to be grouped together in what's called distinct hydro zones. Basically, they don't want you mixing plants that are high water demands with plants that are low water demands. And that makes sense, absolutely. And then plants have to be selected based on their adaptability to the local area. We're supposed to preserve and protect the existing California native species as much as possible, and we cannot use invasive plant species. Turf requirements, the city of Davis, in fact a number of cities, actually really minimize the allowable turf areas. I was recently in Las Vegas, and it was painstakingly obvious how few of the residents in Las Vegas actually have lawn.
Yeah,
Most everything is hardscape there, and it's because of the water. But anyway, landscape turf shall not exceed 25% of a slope. On slopes more than 25%, where the toe of the slope is adjacent to or within 4 feet of an impermeable hardscape. There are soil amendment and conditioning and mulching requirements, basically utilizing mulch to eliminate or reduce the transevaporation from irrigation. They actually have to amend the soils if they have soils that are not soil retention soils, so that the water actually is retained in the soils. Those are on page 58 as well. And then the irrigation requirements are on page 59 of the staff report. There are a number of attachments we have to do with the program. The fact sheet, which I stole from the state, is on page 65. The project information form It's on page 68. The model efficient landscape ordinance itself, the prescriptive standards, is on page 69. And then the performance approach is on page 71. And then the worksheet and examples on page 75. And then again, the trans or evapotranspiration rates are on page 77. With that, actually, we have a couple more. Certificate of completion, page 78. And then how to measure project area. It's the handout again by DWR on page 80. Again, it's a state mandated project that we're obligated to implement. I wasn't made aware of this until recently. And so with that, we're bringing it to your council for approval, for deliberation. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. If not, I recommend that we consider consideration adoption to your meeting of January 21st, and then we will approve and adopt at that meeting.
Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead.
I know I asked you earlier today, but can you explain again the location and size of spate water meters for landscape? When
Yes, and what page was that on?
I don't know, I can't remember the one where I read it in, but I just found that sentence on 73, which reminded me that we had having a second water meter for outdoor.
Yeah, if you've got areas that are larger than, I believe, this is off the top of my head without looking through this, I believe it's more than 1,000 square feet existing, or 1 acre actually for municipal projects. You actually have to have a separate dedicated meter.
Would it be a meter that the city
They're
came and
not
read?
city water meters. No, they're actually just meters that you can buy from Pearson's or Home Depot. And then you're supposed to monitor the amount of water. And then we as city staff, if for some reason we find out that their water bill is extremely high, we can go actually investigate and find out how much water they use for their landscaping. And that's the purpose of that requirement, from what I understand, reading the state regulations.
And we're going to be the first people in this area
As far as I know.
to approve it.
Yeah, no other agencies up here have adopted this.
Okay.
Thank you.
What's the reason for with the landscaping, if somebody wants to spend more water on landscaping, is that because of a short, I can see it as a shortage idea, but not necessarily on a, say we're not in a shortage time, paying for the water, and,
I think the ultimate goal is conservation. Even if we're not in short periods of drought, I think the idea is just to conserve water wherever we can. It was really brought to the forefront by the 2014 drought.
all right, thank you.
Anyone from the public have a question or comment?
I do have a question. Now, are these drip systems or aerated?
It depends on where it's at and what type of irrigation you're doing as far as the plant material. Obviously, the plants themselves, the shrubbery, is going to be drip. Turf will be sprinklered.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then there are actually limits on how much you can apply at a given rate.
Okay. I read some studies, the Ogallala Aquifer, which is probably the largest one in the nation. The scientists have been studying that since the 1940s, and it was 75 years ago that they realized then that the aeration, the farming with aerial irrigation is really not the answer. The farmers said the scientists that studied that said that water eventually just winds up in the ocean. It doesn't even go back into the aquifer. It's lost forever because it's aerated. An adequate amount goes for nourishing the plants, all right, but the rest of it just goes into the atmosphere and winds up into the oceans. And they led to the conclusion that eventually the farmers in our great nation will have to go to drip irrigation, even for those large farms, and maybe even greenhousing them. So
Yeah,
it's just an interesting fact that I learned.
Yeah, as you might expect, the agricultural industry is exempt from these requirements, but I've heard the same thing. From what I hear in certain areas of the country, they use flood irrigation, similar to what we use in our disposal field for our wastewater treatment plant, because it is more efficient. I mean, anybody that's driven through the Ferndale area when the sprinklers are on a windy day, you basically get you get remnants of that irrigation. Eventually, I think we're going to have to tackle that issue as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. So is there a motion to, well, are there any more questions from council? Is there a motion to accept this and move it to continue consideration and approval and adoption to the December 17th meeting?
It would be January 21st. I'm sorry. That's
January 21st. I should have gotten that. Let's continue it till December 17th.
Mayor Garnes, I would,
2019, not 2020.
back to the future.
I would move that we accept the first reading of ordinance number 378, 2020, and for consideration of approval later this month.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. A vote. Motion carries motion carries 4-0. Thank you, and that brings us to council reports.
Yeah, I have a meeting with, this Thursday with RCA. We created an ad hoc committee on the PG&E crisis, I guess you want to call it. So we're meeting with that board Thursday to work with, the goal is to work with PG&E to see where they're going to go on this islanding the county. And there is movements. I know that Rex Bones has worked quite a bit with the county as well on trying to be able to island Humboldt County by using the existing power plant.
That's awesome.
And so hopefully we can get some good answers to what's really going on, because every one you talk to tells you a different story, and even within or without PG&E. So that's that goal.
All right. Good luck with that. Thank you. What else?
Thank you, Mayor Garnes. I received a copy of a staff report dated August 31st, 2011, regarding the River's Edge RV Park, and I would like to agendize a future meeting to discuss that staff report and see if there's going to be any action taken as a result of everybody reviewing the same information.
Okay, I'm not really sure what you said, but
And
I don't know exactly.
When was the
What is the staff report about?
2011?
well, the staff report basically said that when Earl Malley built the RV park, that there was a conditional use permit that required permanent access and maintenance of permanent access for all the community across their property. And the conditional use permit stays with the land, it doesn't stay with the property owner. And so that condition is as binding now as it was 35 or so years ago when the park was initially built. I myself was jogging on the river bar about a month and a half ago and decided to, as I've done for 41 years that I've lived here, run up through the RV park and was confronted by the manager. And I said, hey, why don't you call the cops? They called my bluff, and they did. And the chief said, Gordon, if I got to arrest you, I won't think anything the less of you. But I wasn't arrested. I don't even know if a formal report was written, but you know, it just brings me back to when we've had this discussion before, and you know, Muriel Spencer, who has walked over that property for 80 some years, gets harassed by the managers and told that she can't go across that property that I believe her family owned. That's just not right. That's not right at all. And I would further like for the city manager or staff to bring it to the River's Edge RV Park people that we're going to be pursuing this, and if there's some way to negotiate some kind of a settlement that's mutually agreeable to the folk of Rio Dell, to begin that conversation.
Now that I understand.
Let's get to, what was the date of the staff report?
8/31/11.
No. All right. Because I remember back, that's about the time I came onto the council.
Yeah.
We've gone through this a couple of times. There has been multiple dialogues on this. So, if we want to talk about it again, I know the city, but I thought that's part of what the trail down to the river was partly resolving some of this issue.
Yeah, I was down there jogging yesterday, I guess, and came back on our trail, and our trail is pretty rugged. The deer get up and down it very easily. There's about a 6-8 inch alder tree that had decided to snap off, and with the windstorms of last week or the week before, and was kind of blocking traffic. We just need a year-round.
If we agendize it, we can talk about it. So
Absolutely.
let's do that.
Well, I have a question. Will that be enough, Karen? Is this where we have been looking for that conditional use permit and we haven't been able to find it?
Well, this covers all of
It will?
all of that.
Does it cover the part where they could only have so many permanent trailers there and the rest were to be, do you remember that?
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, there was, and there was, unfortunately, there were, modifications granted with new owners, and, the original permit was not totally enforced at that
Okay.
time, so,
Well, I had just wondered because several times over the years I've brought it up to Karen about
yeah.
it
So-
wasn't going quite like we had planned it when we
Yes.
approved it.
Okay, so do we have,
Copies of that, I believe it was 81 pages.
It's,
Tomorrow, I'll put those in.
it's 110 pages,
okay,
but it's great reading.
well, I'm sure. Well, thank
I'm
you.
glad you got it.
Okay, so do we have a consensus that we would like to see that agendized?
Sure.
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you.
it's consensus, absolutely. No, nothing? And I just wanted to, and hopefully there's someone listening, I want to thank everyone in the city, everyone who signed a petition, everyone that came together to support the city council, to support the city, and to let the Board of Supervisors know, really know, and especially our representative, Supervisor Fennell, that how we felt, and to thank her, because you can't ask for more from an elected official than that they listen to you, that they listen to their constituents. And she listened to the majority of her constituents, and for that, I just wanted to be on record as saying thank you.
Could I say something to that? She came to, after that meeting, there was an RCA meeting, and she is on that board.
Right.
And she came to the meeting to address, because RCA was very, very much in favor of Terrigen. Although we did not take a stand on that specifically, and we actually was agendized, and we did not take a stand on it for reasons that were whatever. But she came and answered a lot of questions and explained just what you're saying as she listened to the input from the public. And one of my understandings of why we have the Brown Act is so that it gives the public an opportunity to change our mind. I come to this meeting probably with my mind made up what I'm going to do in most cases. But then the public has the opportunity to come and talk to me and actually change that mind. And that's what happened here was an exercise of government that spoke enough, and enough stuff came out that Supervisor Fennell changed her mind
Absolutely.
and actually changed the course of events.
Absolutely. Thank you. Is there anything else?
Mayor Garnes, I'd move for adjournment.
Second? Meeting is adjourned until
Next time.
next time. I like that. The 17th of January, I think. 21st of January. Oh, that's the wrong calendar. See, I'm still looking at the wrong